The rain had been falling for hours, thin silver threads stitching the gray sky to the trembling earth. In the quiet cafe on the corner of the old cobblestone street, Daniel sat by the window, watching the blurred shapes of people passing with umbrellas. He wasn't really seeing them. His eyes were heavy with something else, something deeper than weather. The untouched cup of coffee before him had long since gone cold, yet his hands lingered around it, as if the porcelain warmth might return if he only waited long enough. He was waiting, though not for the coffee. He had been waiting for years. Her name was Elena, and for Daniel, it was the only name that could soften his heart, the only sound that could bring warmth to his lonely nights. He met her 10 years ago, when the world still seemed bright, and when love felt like something invincible. She had stepped into his life on another rainy day, with her wild laughter echoing like bells against the storm. She had asked him for directions, and though the street was simple and her destination easy to find, Daniel had walked her all the way there. That was how it began. A walk in the rain, the sharing of an umbrella too small for two, and the moment their shoulders brushed as if fate had stitched them together. They became inseparable after that. She was an artist, painting with colors Daniel never knew existed. He was a writer, his words clumsy until she filled them with life. Together, they dreamed like children, careless of time, careless of the world. They promised each other everything, their futures, their secrets, their souls. For a while, life listened. There were summers of golden light, evenings by the river, late-night conversations where silence itself seemed sacred. Elena would paint while Daniel wrote, their small apartment filled with the scent of oils and paper, of coffee and hope. They had so little money, yet so much happiness. Daniel remembered once when they had only bread and tea for dinner, but she had laughed, tearing the loaf in half and calling it a feast. That laughter had been more nourishing than any meal. But dreams, however radiant, can be fragile things. Slowly, cracks began to appear, small at first, like hairline fractures in glass. Daniel wanted stability, a foundation. He dreamed of publishing books, earning enough to buy them a safer place to live. Elena, however, wanted freedom, color, the chaos of creation. She didn't want to be tied down by mortgages and bank accounts, by deadlines and responsibility. She painted because she had to, because the canvas was her heartbeat, and money was always secondary. Arguments began to slip into their days. They were never cruel, but they were sharp, each word like a pebble dropped into water, rippling further than intended. Daniel accused her of being careless, of living in dreams without thinking of tomorrow. Elena accused him of being afraid, of building walls around their love with his plans and worries. Yet even through the quarrels, their love held them together. They would always return, always find forgiveness in a touch, in a kiss, in the quiet moments when words were no longer needed. Daniel thought this meant they were unbreakable. He thought love could weather anything. But he was wrong. One autumn evening, Elena received an offer, a chance to study in Paris, to work with an artist she had admired all her life. It was the opportunity she had dreamed of since she was a child, a door flung wide open into the life she had always imagined. She wanted Daniel to come with her, but he couldn't. His mother was ill, his father had already passed, and he carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Leaving meant abandoning not just his family, but also the fragile foundation of his writing career, which had only just begun to take shape. They argued again, harder this time, the walls trembling with words neither wanted to say. She accused him of chaining himself to obligations that would eventually suffocate him. He accused her of being selfish, of choosing ambition over love. For the first time, forgiveness did not come easily. And so, one morning, she left. Daniel still remembered the sight of her suitcase by the door, the tremble of her hands as she picked it up, the way her eyes were already drowning with tears. She had kissed him once, soft, broken, and whispered, "If you love me, you'll find me again." Then she walked into the dawn, leaving him standing in the wreckage of everything they had built. The days after her departure were heavy, a silence that filled every corner of the apartment. He tried to write, but every page ended with her name. He tried to forget, but every shadow looked like her, every sound echoed her laughter. Time moved, but Daniel did not. Letters came at first, bright, passionate letters filled with stories of Paris, of the Seine, of nights in art studios and mornings with canvases that stretched taller than her. She wrote of missing him, of dreaming of him, of hoping he would still come. He wrote back, but his words were cautious, restrained, too careful. He wanted to tell her he was coming, but he never did. Responsibility always chained him where he stood. Then, slowly, the letters grew fewer. She was busy, she said. The world was pulling her in every direction, exhibitions, new friends, travels. She still loved him, she always would, but the words became softer, thinner, until one day they stopped altogether. Years passed. Daniel published his first book, then another. His name began to appear in magazines, in reviews. People called him promising, then successful. He moved into a larger apartment, bought nicer furniture, filled his shelves with awards. Outwardly, he had everything he had once dreamed of. But none of it filled the hollow space where Elena had lived. He never loved anyone else. There were women who smiled at him, women who tried to share his evenings, his heart, but none of them were Elena. None of them had her laughter, her wildness, her fire. He always compared, always searched for her in the faces of others, and always returned alone. One winter evening, nearly 10 years after she left, Daniel found himself in Paris for a book tour. He wandered the streets after his reading, the city alive with lights and voices. Something pulled him, perhaps fate, perhaps memory, toward a small gallery near the river. Inside, the walls glowed with paintings that stole his breath. He knew the strokes, the colors, the fire. He knew them as surely as he knew his own heartbeat. And then he saw her. Elena stood in the corner, speaking with a group of admirers. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with silver, her face more mature, but her eyes, those eyes were the same, filled with oceans of dreams. She laughed, and it was the same wild sound that had once saved him from silence. Daniel froze, unable to move. His chest ached with everything he wanted to say, everything he had held back for a decade. At last, he stepped forward, his voice trembling as he whispered her name. She turned. For a moment, the years vanished. They were young again, standing in the rain, holding one umbrella too small for two. Her lips parted, her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat Daniel thought she might fall into his arms. But then her gaze flickered, and he saw it, hesitation, sorrow, something unspoken. Daniel, she breathed, you're here. They spoke for hours that night, walking along the river. She told him of her life, of the struggles and triumphs, of the loneliness she sometimes felt even in rooms full of people. He told her of his books, his mother's passing, the hollow years without her. They laughed, they cried, they remembered. But when the night ended, she did not go with him. Elena was married now, with children. Her husband was kind, supportive, a man who had stood beside her when she needed someone most. She loved her family, she loved her life, and though part of her still loved Daniel, always would, she could not return to him. They parted at dawn, on a bridge painted gold by the rising sun. She kissed his cheek, tears shimmering in her eyes, and whispered the same words she had spoken 10 years before. If you love me, you'll find me again. But this time, Daniel knew there would be no finding. He watched her walk away, just as he had once before, and the ache in his chest was heavier than ever. Yet beneath the sorrow, there was also something else, a strange peace, as if finally the waiting had ended. Daniel returned to his life, his books, his quiet apartment. The rain still fell, the coffee still grew cold, and the world still moved. But now, when he wrote, his words no longer trembled with longing. They carried instead the weight of memory, of love that had been real, even if it had not lasted. Because sometimes love does not end with togetherness. Sometimes its truest form is in the ache it leaves behind, in the way it shapes every word, every breath, every heartbeat. And so Daniel lived, carrying Elena not as a wound, but as a part of himself, a heart that had waited too long, yet loved enough to last a lifetime.